When we create charts and graphs within Excel, it's important to think about the audience. We want to make sure that anyone could look at that chart and graph and come up with a conclusion very quickly. Think about when you're watching the news. They're going to show an image for a very short period of time, 8, maybe 10 seconds. So your visualization really has to convey that message effectively. So let's take a look at an example of how we could have some visualization problems. With this data, we have information on 5 different production lines, and we have sales from January, February, March, April, May, and June. If I were to go through and select all of this data, I could go through and do insert, and I'm going to go ahead and look at the recommended charts, but I'm not going to use them so we can see kind of how this could be ineffective. The first one that comes up is one that would make the most sense. We've got a line chart, which is great and ideal really for showing data over time because it's going to show us that trend. Let's say we look at this bar chart first. With this bar chart, I've got information from January, February, March, and so on, but it's harder to see some of the trends, right? Picking out what line 2 is versus line 3, and even though they're always in the same order, it's hard to see that overall trend within that. One of the other ones that I want to show you is a stacked area chart, which is showing the information accurately, but it's important to note that oftentimes the magnitude is lost within this. We're still seeing things over time, but when we look at line 2, because it's in the foreground of the image, the magnitude looks much bigger because that orange really stands out. So I'm going to go through and select all charts. And when I go through and look at, say, the bar chart, there's various options. And I'm going to show you, let's go ahead and go to the column chart first. It's interesting, a lot of times I'll see 3D clustered columns charts. And I'll go ahead and select this option and we'll take a look at it. When we do this with the chart, it's got some depth to it, which makes it very difficult to read. It's hard to see where the top of the bar is. Just adding that extra element, while some might consider this a little bit fancier, it's almost overkill and harder for people to really visualize and see. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this one and show you another one. So let's look at the 3D column chart. The 3D column chart is one that visually can be very confusing. So for example, if we look at line 1 in the front, it essentially appears to be next to nothing or 0. But it's hard because some of our bars will also block things behind it. In general, while a 3D chart is an option, it's rarely the best option because it's so difficult for most people to read and glean information very quickly. So we'd want to be very careful as we're selecting any chart. We want to think about the purpose of that chart, what it does. And again, for this instance, because we're looking at data over time, the line chart is the best option for data over time. And again, you must always think about who the audience is and how they could potentially interpret this chart, because we need to make sure that it's effectively conveying its information in a matter of seconds.